The silence of deep space was broken by a signal that would change everything. Captain Daniel Carter stood on the bridge of his ship watching the empty darkness ahead. His vessel had been patrolling this region for 3 months without seeing anything unusual. The crew had fallen into a comfortable routine of checking systems and monitoring sensors. Nothing ever happened out here on the edge of human territory. Lieutenant Kate Morrison sat at her station working through the usual communications checks. Her fingers moved across the console with practiced ease. She had done this same task 1,000 times before. But then something appeared on her screen that made her stop. The signal was faint at first, but it grew stronger as the computers locked onto it. Kate frowned as she analyzed the data. This was not like anything she had seen in her 8 years of service. The signal had a pattern to it, but the encoding was completely unknown. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost desperate. Kate ran it through every database they had but found no matches. This was not a human signal. Her heart began to beat faster as she realized what this might mean. She turned to look at her captain. Daniel noticed her expression immediately. He walked over to her station and looked at the displays. The waveforms were strange and alien, but there was something about them that spoke of urgency. Even without understanding the language, he could feel the desperation in those pulses. Someone somewhere was calling for help. Kate worked quickly to get more information from the signal. The computers began to triangulate the source. Numbers appeared on her screen showing distance and direction. The signal was coming from a star system called Kepler 442. It was far away, but not impossibly so. She looked up at Daniel with wide eyes and told him what she had found. The captain felt a chill run through him. They might be looking at first contact with an alien species. This was something every officer dreamed about and feared in equal measure. Everything they did from this moment forward would be recorded in history. He knew they had to be careful, but they also had to act quickly. Someone was in trouble. Commander Eric Palmer stepped forward. He was an older man with gray hair and sharp eyes. He reminded Daniel that regulations required them to report this to Fleet Command before taking any action. Daniel agreed immediately. They would follow proper procedures. But while they waited for orders, he wanted to be ready to move. He told his crew to plot a course to the source of the signal. The tactical officer, Lieutenant Greg Hamilton, brought his weapons systems online. They had no idea what they were flying into. It could be a trap or it could be a genuine emergency. Either way, they needed to be prepared for anything. The ship's shields came to full power. Weapons were armed and ready. The crew moved with efficient purpose as they prepared for potential combat. Kate continued working on the signal. The ship's artificial intelligence was learning to decode the alien language. It was slow work because the computer had nothing to compare it to, but gradually patterns began to emerge. Words started to appear on her screen. The translations were rough, but they were enough. She saw words like help and danger. There was another word that the computer translated as destroy or annihilate. Daniel asked how long it would take to reach the star system. The navigator told him 6 hours at maximum speed. Daniel ordered them to push the engines harder. They would do it in 5 hours. He also ordered the medical bay to prepare for casualties. They had no idea what they would find when they arrived, but it was better to be ready for anything. The ship surged forward into the darkness. Behind them, a message was being sent to Fleet Command explaining the situation. But they were not going to wait for permission. If someone needed help, they were going to provide it. That was what humans did. Kate continued to refine the translation. More words became clear. The message spoke of an attack. It mentioned another species that was hostile. The aliens called them devourers or harvesters. The exact translation was unclear, but the meaning was obvious. Someone was being attacked by someone else. The message spoke of civilizations ending and worlds dying. It painted a picture of desperate survival against overwhelming odds. Eric studied the translated fragments with concern. This sounded like a war. They might be flying into the middle of a conflict between two alien species. That complicated everything. They would need to figure out who were the victims and who were the aggressors. But given that one side was broadcasting distress signals, it seemed clear which side needed help. Daniel stood in the center of his bridge watching his crew work. Every person here was a trained professional. They had practiced for situations like this in countless simulations, but simulations were nothing compared to reality. His ship was just one vessel with limited weapons and shields. They had no idea what kind of firepower they might face, but none of that mattered. Someone was calling for help and they were going to answer. Kate announced that she had broken through more of the message. The aliens identified themselves as the Viking Concordat. Their civilization had existed for thousands of years. They had been peaceful explorers and traders. But now they were facing extinction. The hostile species had been attacking their worlds for months. Their defenses had failed. Their fleet had been destroyed. They were sending out this desperate message to anyone who might hear. They did not expect a response. They simply hoped that someone somewhere would know what had happened to them. The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. These aliens had given up hope. They were sending their final message into the void like a bottle cast into an endless ocean. They did not think anyone would come. But they were wrong. Humans had heard them, and humans were coming. Greg reported that all weapon systems were fully operational. The shields were at maximum strength. They were as ready as they could be for whatever awaited them. Daniel nodded in approval. He opened a channel to the entire crew. His voice was calm and steady as he spoke. He told them they were about to make first contact with an alien species. He told them those aliens were under attack and needed help. He told them that what they did in the next few hours would define humanity's place in the galaxy. The ship raced through space toward the unknown. Every minute brought them closer to the Kepler 442 system. Every minute brought them closer to a battle they did not fully understand. But they were not afraid. They were human. And humans did not abandon those in need. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. What appeared on the view screen made everyone on the bridge freeze in shock. The system was a battlefield. Debris floated everywhere in massive fields that stretched as far as their sensors could detect. Pieces of destroyed ships drifted through space. Some were still burning. Some were just twisted metal. Explosions continued to light up the darkness as the battle raged on. Kate stared at the screen with horror in her eyes. She had never seen destruction on this scale. Thousands of ships must have died here, maybe tens of thousands. The debris field told a story of desperate fighting and overwhelming defeat. She forced herself to focus on her instruments and began scanning for the source of the distress signal. Daniel gripped the armrests of his command chair. He had prepared himself for combat, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. The battle had been going on for a long time. The aliens had fought hard, but they were losing badly. He could see it in the way their remaining ships moved. They were exhausted and desperate. Greg worked his tactical console rapidly. His training took over as he analyzed the enemy forces. The hostile ships were strange. They looked organic rather than mechanical. Their hulls seemed to be made of some kind of living tissue. They moved through space like predators hunting prey. He counted at least 40 of these bioships in the immediate area. His sensors showed many more throughout the system. The enemy vessels were attacking what looked like the remains of a defensive fleet. The alien defenders had sleek ships with elegant curves and bright colors, but many of them were damaged or destroyed. Only a few dozen remained operational. They were fighting bravely, but their weapons seemed to have little effect on the bioships. Energy beams splashed harmlessly off organic armor. Missiles exploded without doing significant damage. Kate located the source of the distress signal. It was coming from a huge structure in orbit around the fourth planet. The structure was clearly some kind of space station or habitat. It was massive, easily 10 times bigger than anything humans had ever built. But it was dying. The bioships were surrounding it and tearing it apart piece by piece. She could see explosions on its surface. Sections were breaking away and falling toward the planet below. Small pods were launching from the station, escape pods carrying civilians. They scattered in all directions, trying to flee the destruction. But the bioships were hunting them. Kate watched in horror as the organic vessels pursued the pods and destroyed them one by one. These were not military targets. They were innocent people trying to survive. The enemy was killing them anyway. Daniel felt anger surge through him. These bioships were not just fighting a war. They were committing genocide. He opened a communications channel and sent a message to the alien station. He identified himself as Captain Daniel Carter of the human vessel Valiant. He told them help had arrived. The response came quickly. A synthesized voice spoke in English. The artificial intelligence had learned their language from the initial communications. The voice identified itself as Coordinator Zefrik of the Viking Concordat. The alien commander sounded surprised and confused. He asked why humans had come. He warned them to flee. The harvesters would destroy them, just like they had destroyed the Concordat fleet. One ship could not make a difference against such overwhelming numbers. Daniel listened to the alien's words, but he had already made his decision. He told Greg to target the nearest group of bioships. It was time to show these harvesters what human weapons could do. Greg smiled grimly and locked his targeting systems onto 8 enemy vessels. They were clustered together, attacking a damaged Concordat ship. Perfect targets, the Valiant opened fire. Railguns accelerated metal slugs to incredible speeds. The projectiles crossed the distance in seconds and punched through the organic armor of the bioships like they were made of paper. Missiles followed immediately behind. They were tipped with plasma warheads that burned hotter than the surface of a star. The warheads detonated and consumed everything around them. The 8 bioships died in less than 30 seconds. They never had a chance to react. One moment they were attacking a helpless target. The next moment they were expanding clouds of vaporized tissue and metal. The explosions lit up space with brilliant flashes of light. The bridge crew cheered. But Daniel raised his hand for silence. He asked Eric how many enemy ships were turning toward them. Eric checked his sensors and reported that all of them were. Every bioship in the immediate area had broken off from their attacks. They were all converging on the Valiant. The humans had their attention now. Daniel smiled coldly. That was exactly what he wanted. If the bioships were focused on his vessel, they were not attacking the station. The Concordat civilians would have more time to escape. He ordered evasive maneuvers and told Greg to keep firing. They were going to keep these harvesters busy. The Valiant began to move through space in complex patterns. Its engines fired in carefully timed bursts that sent it spinning and diving and climbing. The bioships tried to follow, but human ships were faster and more maneuverable. Enemy weapons fire chased after them, but the Valiant was never where the enemy expected it to be. The few shots that did connect splashed harmlessly off the ship's shields. Meanwhile, Greg kept up a steady stream of fire. Every shot was precisely aimed. Every missile hit its target. Bioships died one after another. The harvesters had never faced weapons like this before. They had overwhelmed the Concordat through sheer numbers and tough organic armor. But human weapons punched through that armor like it was nothing. Human technology was simply more advanced. Kate coordinated with the surviving Concordat ships. She told them to focus on protecting the escape pods. The human ship would handle the bioships. The alien vessels immediately changed their tactics. They stopped trying to fight and started forming a protective screen around the fleeing civilians. It was a smart move. Let the humans do what they did best. Coordinator Zefric contacted them again. His voice was different now. The disbelief was gone. In its place was hope. He told Daniel that their weapons were incredibly effective. The Concordat had never seen the harvesters fall so easily. But he worried that one ship could not hold off this many enemies. He asked how long the humans could maintain this level of combat. Daniel checked his ammunition levels and shield strength. They were doing well, but he knew they could not keep this up forever. The bioships were adapting. Their formations were becoming more sophisticated. They were learning to avoid the railgun fire and missile strikes. Eventually, the sheer numbers would overwhelm even superior technology. But Daniel was not worried. He had a secret that Coordinator Zefric did not know about yet. The Valiant was not alone. Help was on the way. He just had to hold out a little longer. He told the Coordinator they would fight for as long as necessary. However long it took to evacuate all the civilians from that station, Kate suddenly shouted with excitement. New contacts were appearing on her sensors. Multiple ships were dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. She identified them quickly. They were human warships. 5 of them. The fleet had arrived. The 5 human warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Leading them was the heavy cruiser Defiant, commanded by Captain Helen Price. The massive vessel bristled with weapons and armor. Behind it came the destroyers Tempest and Warhawk, along with the smaller ships Guardian and Lightning. Each one was ready for combat. Helen's voice came through the communications channel. She sounded confident and eager. She joked that Daniel had started the party without waiting for everyone else. Fleet Command had sent reinforcements as soon as they received his initial report. She asked what the situation was and how they could help. Daniel felt relief wash over him. 5 more ships meant they actually had a chance to win this fight. He quickly transmitted all his tactical data to the incoming fleet. The other captains would need to understand what they were facing. He explained that there were hundreds of bioships in the system. The enemy was numerous but vulnerable to human weapons. The priority was protecting the Concordate civilians who were evacuating their station. Captain Helen received the data and analyzed it quickly. She understood the situation immediately. The humans needed to buy time for the aliens to escape. That meant holding this position against overwhelming numbers. It would not be easy, but it was definitely possible. She ordered her fleet to form up on the Valiant's position. The 6 human ships arranged themselves into a defensive formation. Each vessel had a specific role. The Defiant would anchor the center with its heavy weapons. The Tempest and Warhawk would provide mobile firepower on the flanks. The Guardian and Lightning would protect against any attempts to flank or surround them, and the Valiant would continue doing what it had been doing so effectively. Daniel opened a channel to all the human ships. His voice was steady and calm. He told them their objective was simple: protect the innocent people trying to escape, eliminate the Harvester threat, show the galaxy what humanity stood for. Every captain acknowledged his words. They were ready. The human fleet surged forward into battle. The Defiant opened fire first. Its massive rail cannons were even larger than the ones on the Valiant. Each shot carried enough kinetic energy to shatter a small moon. The heavy slugs tore through bioships with devastating effect. One shot would punch completely through a Harvester vessel and keep going to hit another one behind it. Helen coordinated the assault with practiced skill. She had spent 30 years in the fleet and fought in countless training simulations. This was her first real battle, but she handled it like a veteran. She identified the largest bioships as command vessels. Those became priority targets. If they could disrupt the enemy's command structure, the smaller ships would lose coordination. The Tempest and Warhawk moved in synchronized attacks. Their captains Alan Ross and Michelle Lee worked together perfectly. They had trained as a team for years, and it showed. They executed complex maneuvers that caught groups of bioships in crossfire. Plasma torpedoes and kinetic missiles filled the space between them. Nothing survived in that kill zone. The bioships tried to respond, but they were completely outmatched. Their organic weapons fired streams of bioenergy that looked impressive, but did minimal damage to human shields. Their armor that had protected them against Concordate weapons was useless against human technology. They died by the dozens as the fleet cut through them. Kate continued monitoring the Concordate evacuation. The escape pods were still launching from the dying station. Thousands of them filled space like a swarm of insects. The surviving Concordate warships formed a protective screen around the pods. They were no longer trying to fight. They were just trying to get their people to safety. Coordinator Zefric contacted the human fleet again. His voice trembled with emotion. He said his people were inspired by human courage. The Concordate had been retreating and dying for months. They had lost hope of survival, but seeing the humans fight so fearlessly had rekindled their will to resist. His remaining ships wanted to join the battle. They wanted to fight alongside humanity. Daniel considered the request. The Concordate ships were damaged and their weapons were not very effective, but they could still contribute. He told the coordinator to focus fire on bioships that were closest to the station. Every target they destroyed was one less threat to the escaping civilians. He also warned them to stay close to the human ships. The fleet would provide covering fire and protection. The combined human and Concordate force pushed forward. They drove the bioships back from the orbital station. The Harvesters fell back in confusion. They had spent months crushing the Concordate through brute force. Now suddenly they were the ones being crushed. Their casualties mounted rapidly as human weapons tore them apart. But the Harvesters were not defeated yet. More bioships began arriving from the outer parts of the system. They had been attacking other targets, but now they converged on this location. Kate's sensors showed the enemy numbers climbing. 200 ships. 300. 400. The Harvesters were committing everything they had to this fight. Greg reported the incoming reinforcements to Daniel. The tactical display showed bioships approaching from multiple directions. If they were not careful, the human fleet would be surrounded. Being surrounded by that many enemies would be dangerous even with their superior weapons. Their shields could only take so much punishment. Eric studied the tactical situation carefully. He had been Daniel's executive officer for 5 years. They worked well together. He suggested that they needed to break the enemy formation before it could completely surround them. If they stayed in one place, they would eventually be overwhelmed. They needed to be aggressive. Daniel agreed. He opened a channel to all human ships and explained his plan. They would execute what he called a sphere expansion maneuver. All ships would fire their engines at maximum power in different directions. They would blast outward in all directions at once while maintaining maximum weapons fire. It would blow a hole in the enemy formation. Then they could regroup and continue fighting from a better position. Helen liked the plan immediately. It was risky, but it would catch the bioships off guard. The other captains also agreed. Even Coordinator Zephyric said his ships would follow the human lead. They had come to trust Daniel's tactical judgment completely. The bioships continued closing in. They thought they had the humans trapped. Their formation tightened as they prepared to overwhelm the defenders with sheer numbers. They had won countless battles this way, but they had never fought humans before. Daniel watched the tactical display carefully. Timing was critical. If they moved too soon, the bioships could adjust. If they waited too long, they would be trapped. He counted down in his head. The enemy formation was almost complete. Just a few more seconds, now Daniel gave the order. Every human ship fired its engines at full power. They exploded outward in all directions simultaneously. Their weapons blazed in a continuous stream of destruction. The sphere expansion maneuver turned into an expanding ball of death. Any bioship caught in that sphere died instantly. The harvester formation shattered. They had expected the humans to defend. They had not expected this aggressive counterattack. Dozens of bioships exploded as the human fleet tore through them. The carefully planned encirclement turned into chaos and death. The human fleet burst through the bioship formation like a hammer through glass. Explosions bloomed across space as harvester vessels died by the dozens. The coordinated attack had caught them completely by surprise. They had expected the humans to be trapped and desperate. Instead, the humans had turned defense into offense with devastating results. Daniel's crew watched their screens as the tactical display updated. The bioship casualties were climbing rapidly. 40 ships destroyed, 50, 60. The numbers kept rising as the human weapons found their targets. Greg was firing continuously. His hands moved across his console with practiced speed. Every shot counted. Every missile mattered. The Valiant led the charge through the gap they had created. Behind them, the other human ships followed in perfect formation. The Concordant vessels stayed close to their protectors. Together, they moved like a single organism. The bioships tried to reform and pursue, but they were too slow and too disorganized. Helen reported from the Defiant. Her ship had taken some damage, but nothing serious. A few hull breaches that were already being sealed. Her weapons were still operating at full capacity. She asked Daniel where they should regroup. They needed a defensible position where they could continue protecting the evacuation. Daniel had already identified the perfect location. Behind the massive orbital station, there was an area of relative safety. The station's bulk would provide cover from some directions. The human fleet could use it as a shield while they continued to hold off the bioships. He ordered all vessels to make for that position at maximum speed. The combined fleet raced toward the station. The bioships pursued, but they were more cautious now. They had learned to respect human firepower. They hung back and tried to coordinate their attacks better. But every moment they hesitated gave the humans more time to prepare. Kate monitored the escape pod launches. The good news was that the evacuation was nearly complete. Only a few thousand more Concordant civilians remained on the dying station. The bad news was that it would still take another hour or two to get everyone off. The human fleet needed to hold this position for at least that long. The ships reached the station and took up defensive positions. Each vessel positioned itself to cover a specific approach vector. They created overlapping fields of fire that would catch any bioship trying to get close. It was a strong defensive formation, but it relied on the ships working together perfectly. Coordinator Zephyric contacted Daniel again. The alien commander expressed his deep gratitude. His people had been saved when all hope seemed lost. He offered to have his warships stay and fight, but Daniel could tell the Concordant vessels were barely functional. Their weapons were depleted and their hulls were heavily damaged. They would be more liability than help in the coming fight. Daniel made a decision. He ordered the coordinator to take his remaining ships and escort the escape pods to safety. Get them out of the combat zone. The human fleet would handle the bioships. This was what they were built for. Zephyric started to protest, but Daniel was firm. His people had fought bravely, but now it was time to ensure the civilians survived. That was the most important thing. The Concordat commander finally agreed. His voice was thick with emotion as he thanked Daniel and the human fleet. He promised that if they survived this day, the Viking Concordat would remember humanity's sacrifice forever. They would be allies and friends for all time. Then his ships turned and began escorting the escape pods toward the outer system. The human fleet was now alone, 6 ships against hundreds of bioships. The numbers were heavily against them, but Daniel felt confident. They had superior technology and superior training. More importantly, they had something worth fighting for. They were protecting innocent lives. That gave them strength that the bioships could never match. The bioships began their assault. They came in waves, trying to overwhelm the human defenses through sheer numbers, but the defensive formation held. Every approach was covered by at least 2 human ships. The bioships flew into walls of fire that shredded them. Their organic armor could not protect them. Their bioenergy weapons could barely scratch human shields. Hours passed. The battle continued without pause. The bioships kept coming and the humans kept destroying them. But the strain was beginning to show. Ammunition was running low. Shield generators were overheating from constant use. The crews were exhausted from maintaining battle stations for so long. Helen reported from the Defiant. Her ship was down to 60% ammunition. Shields were holding at 75%, but they had suffered hull damage in several places. Her crew was performing emergency repairs, but it would take time. The other ships reported similar conditions. They were still combat effective, but they could not maintain this pace forever. Daniel checked his own ship's status. The Valiant was in better shape than most because it had been the first to arrive and had already burned through some supplies. But they were still facing the same problems. Ammunition reserves were dwindling. His crew was tired. People were making small mistakes from fatigue. Eric approached Daniel with a serious expression. His executive officer spoke quietly so only Daniel could hear. The math was simple. They could not defeat all the bioships. There were just too many. But they did not need to win. They just needed to hold out long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Fleet Command knew their situation. More ships would be coming. The question was whether they could survive until help arrived. Kate had been monitoring long-range communications. She checked the latest reports from Fleet Command. The news was both good and bad. A major fleet was on its way, 30 ships including some of humanity's most powerful warships. But they were still hours away. The fastest estimate for their arrival was 8 hours from now. 8 hours. Daniel looked at his tired crew. He looked at the tactical display showing hundreds of enemy contacts. He looked at the ammunition counters slowly counting down to 0. 8 hours seemed like forever. But they had come this far. They were not going to quit now. He opened a channel to all human ships. His voice was calm and steady. He told them reinforcements were coming in 8 hours. Until then, they would hold this position. They would protect those civilians. They would show the galaxy what humanity was capable of. Every captain acknowledged his words. There was no hesitation, no doubt. They would do their duty. The bioships continued their relentless assault. They seemed to have unlimited numbers. Whenever one wave was destroyed, another appeared to take its place. They were learning from their mistakes, too. Their formations became more sophisticated. They tried flanking maneuvers and feints. They coordinated their attacks to hit multiple targets simultaneously. The human fleet adapted to each new tactic. When the bioships tried to flank, they repositioned to cover the approach. When the enemy coordinated attacks, they focused fire on the most dangerous threats. It became a deadly game of move and counter-move, each side trying to find an advantage. The Lightning took heavy damage when a group of bioships broke through the defensive line. The small frigate's shields failed and enemy fire tore into its hull. The captain ordered emergency maneuvers and the Guardian moved to provide covering fire. Together they managed to drive off the attackers, but the Lightning was badly hurt. It could still fight, but its effectiveness was greatly reduced. More hours passed. The human ships continued to hold, but the cost was mounting. Casualties from hull breaches. Systems failing from overuse. Ammunition stocks dropping to critical levels. The bioships sensed weakness and pressed their attacks harder. Then Kate shouted something that brought hope to every heart on every bridge. Multiple warp signatures detected. Ships were arriving. Lots of ships. She identified them quickly, and her voice filled with joy. It was the fleet. The entire human battle fleet. 30 warships dropping out of faster-than-light travel right on schedule. Help had arrived. 30 human warships appeared in the Kepler 442 system all at once. Space rippled with their arrival as they transitioned from faster-than-light travel to normal space. Leading them was the massive dreadnought Enterprise. It was humanity's flagship and the most powerful vessel ever built. The ship bristled with weapons, and its armor was thick enough to withstand almost anything. Admiral Christina Blake commanded the fleet from the bridge of the Enterprise. Her voice came through every human ship's communication system. It was calm and authoritative. She told Daniel and the other captains that they had done well. They had held against impossible odds. Now the full fleet would finish the job. She ordered all vessels to weapons-free status. It was time to show the harvesters what real power looked like. The fresh fleet moved forward in perfect formation. They had full ammunition stores. Their shields were at maximum power. Their crews were rested and ready. The bioships that had been slowly grinding down the 6 defenders now faced 30 fresh warships. The odds had shifted dramatically. What followed was not really a battle. It was more like an execution. The human fleet tore through the bioship forces with overwhelming firepower. Dreadnoughts fired massive rail cannons that could destroy multiple targets with a single shot. Cruisers launched waves of missiles that filled space with explosions. Destroyers darted between larger ships, picking off scattered enemies. Frigates protected the flanks and prevented any escape. Daniel watched from the Valiant's bridge as the fleet demonstrated humanity's full military might. It was beautiful in a terrible way. The bioships tried to fight back, but they were outclassed in every way. Their numbers meant nothing against this level of firepower. They died by the hundreds. Space filled with debris and the glow of explosions. The crews of the 6 original ships watched with exhausted satisfaction. They had held long enough. They had protected the innocents. They had bought time for this moment. Now they could finally stand down from battle stations and let others finish the fight. Helen contacted Daniel from the Defiant. Her voice was tired but happy. She thanked him for his leadership. The 6 ships had worked together perfectly because Daniel had coordinated everything so well. He had made the right calls at the right times. That was why they had all survived. Daniel thanked her in return. Every captain had done their duty and more. They were all heroes today. The battle continued for another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. The bioships tried to retreat, but the human fleet pursued them relentlessly. Admiral Blake had ordered that none should escape. These harvesters had committed genocide against the Concordat. They had killed billions of innocent people. There would be no mercy for them today. The last bioship was destroyed near the edge of the system. It tried to jump to faster than light speed, but human missiles caught it before it could escape. The explosion marked the end of the harvester presence in Kepler 442. After months of terror and death, the system was finally free. Admiral Blake ordered all ships to stand down from combat status. Search and rescue teams were deployed to look for survivors in the debris fields. Medical ships prepared to treat casualties. Engineering teams began assessing damage to the human vessels. The hard work of recovery was beginning. Daniel felt exhaustion hit him like a physical force. He had been on the bridge for over 12 hours straight. Most of that time had been spent in intense combat. His body ached and his mind felt fuzzy. But he could not rest yet. There was still work to do. Admiral Blake requested a private communication channel with Daniel. When her face appeared on his screen, she was smiling. She told him that he and his crew had performed admirably. Their actions had saved an entire civilization. More than that, they had announced humanity's presence on the galactic stage in the most dramatic way possible. First contact had been made through an act of heroism and sacrifice that would define how other species saw humanity for generations to come. Daniel thanked the admiral but said he was just doing his duty. Any other captain would have done the same. Blake disagreed. Not every captain would have had the courage to answer that distress call. Not every captain would have held against such impossible odds. Daniel was being modest, but his actions spoke louder than his words. The admiral then told him to open a channel to Coordinator Zephyric. It was time for formal introductions between humanity and the Viking Concordat. Daniel did so, and soon the alien commander's face appeared on screen alongside the admiral. This was the first time Daniel had actually seen what the Concordat looked like. Zephyric was humanoid but distinctly alien. His skin had an iridescent quality that shifted colors as he moved. His eyes were large and expressive. His features were elegant and refined. He looked exhausted and emotional, but also hopeful. When he spoke, his voice trembled. The coordinator began with formal greetings and thanks. He spoke on behalf of all the Vy'keen people. They had been facing extinction. Their civilization was ending. They had sent out their distress signal without any real hope of response. The galaxy was a big place and they were just one small species. But humanity had heard them. Humans had come from across the stars to help people they had never met. The Concordat would never forget this debt. Admiral Blake responded with equal formality. She explained that humanity was new to space exploration. They had only recently developed faster-than-light travel. The Concordat was the first alien species they had encountered. Humanity was honored to meet them under these circumstances. She expressed regret that their first meeting had to be during such a terrible crisis, but she was glad that humans had been able to help. Zephyric's colors shifted to show deep emotion. He said that the Concordat had existed for 10,000 years. In that time, they had met many species. Some had been friends. Some had been enemies. Some had been neutral. But never had they met a people like humanity, a species that would risk everything for strangers, a species that valued compassion and courage above safety. The Concordat would stand with humanity from this day forward. They would be eternal allies and friends. The Admiral accepted the offer of friendship and alliance. She said that humanity believed in helping those in need. Civilized people looked out for each other. That was a core value that humans would bring to the galaxy. She looked forward to building a lasting partnership between their peoples. The three of them discussed practical matters for a while. The Concordat had lost many ships and stations, but their people had survived. The civilians in the escape pods were safe. They would need help rebuilding, but they had the knowledge and skills to recover. Humanity offered assistance with technology and resources. The Concordat accepted gratefully. Over the next several days, the human fleet helped with recovery operations. Engineers from both species worked together to repair damaged vessels. Medical teams treated the wounded. Scientists began sharing knowledge and learning from each other. The Concordat opened their archives to humanity. They shared star charts showing thousands of systems. They provided information about dozens of other species. They taught humans about galactic politics and trade. In return, human scientists shared Earth's technological achievements. The Concordat was particularly interested in human weapons and shield technology. These had proven far superior to anything they possessed. Humanity agreed to share these advances. They would work together to ensure the harvesters could never threaten anyone again. Daniel stood on the observation deck watching human and Concordat ships working side by side. It had been only a week since that first distress signal. So much had changed in such a short time. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They had found friends among the stars. They had proven themselves worthy of respect. Kate joined him with 2 cups of coffee. They stood together in comfortable silence for a while. She finally spoke and said it was hard to believe. A week ago, they had been on routine patrol. Now they were part of history. First contact, first battle, first alliance. Everything was different, Daniel agreed. He thought about the future. There would be more species to meet, more challenges to face, more threats to overcome. But humanity would not face them alone. They had allies now. They had friends. Together they would make the galaxy a better place. That was worth fighting for.